to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. Another popular topic, and I think this is an influence from the whole New Age movement, which, like it or not, that has a strong influence on modern paganism. That brings about a lot of questions about past life experiences and reincarnation. Those are very popular topics in paganism as well as in New Age. Well, how does this fit into the Egyptian religion? That's something we need to look at. Unfortunately, there's no way to sugarcoat it. There was no belief in reincarnation in pharaonic Egypt. Now, when the Greeks started to come in, they started to introduce a lot of new ideas. There is a story, it's the second of a pair of stories about a character named Setna Khaemweset. That's in Merriam-Lichtein's ancient Egyptian literature. This story was written during the Greek era, during the Ptolemies rule. And it introduces several Greek ideas because you have the story of an ancient priest who's reborn as the son of Setna Khaemweset, who's the hero of several stories. And his son takes Setna through the underworld at a certain point, and you see kind of a merging of traditional Egyptian and Greek ideas. If you're familiar with Greek mythology, there's actually a couple of themes like Tantalus and some other things that they see in the underworld. But this idea that an ancient lector priest is reborn, that's, pretty much, approaching reincarnation as we think of it now. And that was a new idea to them at that point. That was a Greek influence. Where did the Greeks get the idea of reincarnation? I'm not an authority on that. Anyone who's an expert on, Greek religion is welcome to post their own responses. But most of our modern ideas are influenced by Asian religion, Hinduism, Buddhism, ideas like karma, and those are things that have been adopted into modern paganism, particularly Wicca. So let's take a look at Buddhist ideas of the soul, how that fits into reincarnation, and compare it with some Egyptian ideas. Buddhists believe that your person, not necessarily the soul as we know it, if you get into what they call Theravadan Buddhism, they don't even believe that you have a soul necessarily. It's just these conglomerate parts, which are your form, your body, your senses, perception, which is interpreting those senses, your impulses, volition, and consciousness. And those 5 skandhas break apart when you die. And whenever they reconfigure, that's that's another lifetime. Egyptian belief also had components of the person, and let's see, then there were 5, but they're not the same as the Buddhist, since it wasn't like the 5 skandhas. You have your body, the Ka, which is your life force that comes from the creator god, be it Ra or another, your Ba, which is your personality, your manifestation, your name, and your shadow. Notice these are not as cerebral as the Buddhist ideas. Buddhists and Hindus both, there's a shared lineage between those two religions, and they both looked a lot at consciousness and what does it mean to be, in your body, out of your body, one with something else, a lot more so than the Egyptians did. The Egyptians were very, much about the here and now. And they believed that these parts, your body, your Ba, your Ka, your name, and your shadow, they all broke apart at death, but the whole idea was the funerary rites were meant to merge your Ba and your Ka back together. That's when you became an Akh spirit, what they call a transfigured spirit. And they preserved the body so that that Akh could recognize it. it's a different approach from Buddhism and Hinduism, which just kind of says, well, we're going to look forward to another combination somewhere down the line. The Egyptians were like, well, let's try to keep this one. Now looking at that in a modern interpretation, this, you're free to disagree with these. These are just my thoughts on reincarnation. Theoretically, you could have one Ka that ends up having multiple bodies and multiple Bas, personalities, manifestations, because they reincarnated. But that would be a brand new way of looking at it. That doesn't exist in traditional Kemetic belief. Here's another interesting thing to consider, what sociologists call social memory. And that's pretty easy to explain. How far back do you remember your ancestors? You probably know your grandparents. Not everyone does. But most of us know our grandparents, maybe a couple of great grandparents. But how far beyond that? I had a great grandmother who was actually born in the 1800s. She had my grandfather when she was 40. So I know about her. I've seen pictures, but I never met her, obviously. And I know even less about her parents, and going back from that. Now imagine a society that is mostly illiterate, and so they don't have names written down, in their equivalent of the family Bible. So after a certain point, if someone died before you came along, you don't know them, you don't remember them, and eventually, there's, unless they left a monument, which wealthy Egyptians sank a lot of money into, or a lot of resources. If you didn't have that, eventually nobody would remember who you were. So at that point, there's no ties left, and it's possible that after that point, people came back, in another life. And that's one area where I kind of disagree with Buddhist thought. A lot of Buddhists believe, for example, if someone commits suicide, and my Japanese neighbor said that 75 days later they'll come back. I disagree with that. I think in the example of someone who commits suicide, it's not until all of the people that they know and whose lives they affected are gone, that they'll have a chance to come back. And in ancient times, that was 3,000 years removed from our world today. There could have been a lot of new spirits that that was their first lifetime, and since then they've come back who knows how many times. Any one of us might have been ancient Egyptian in a past life. But here's the funny thing. Lots of people claim to have a past life in ancient Egypt, but notice it's always somebody important. It's a pharaoh or a princess or whatever. Just by sheer numbers, most of us, if we lived in ancient Egypt, probably slept on a dirt floor in a mud brick hut somewhere. But that wouldn't have made us any less Egyptian than the pharaoh, because somebody had to build the monuments, build the temples. Somebody had to cook the food that was offered in the temples every day. It's just that the pharaoh is the one who gets his name written in stone. On that note, a lot of books, especially in kind of, again, that bleed over from New Age into modern paganism, talk about a character named Seti. She was a British woman who was born in the early 1900s. Her name was Dorothy Eady. And her story is that she had supposedly been a priestess in ancient Egypt who had a liaison with the pharaoh Seti I, and when it was discovered that she was pregnant by him, she was forced to commit suicide. There are a lot of problems with this story. For one, priestesses in ancient Egypt were not virgins. It's not like the Vestal virgins in Rome. And Seti I, when he reached the throne, was a widower. But he could have seen a beautiful young girl at the temple of Osiris and Abydos and said, "Hey, I'd like you for my harem." He's the pharaoh. Who'd tell him no? But she had this story about how she had to commit suicide in order to prevent dishonor and all that. The problem is that and a lot of other details just sound too contrived. And she also in one of her books talks about how this because she started to receive visits from who she said was the spirit of Seti the First. She might have been talking to a spirit, but I very much doubt it was Seti the First, because some of the things that this spirit supposedly told her do not match what we know about ancient Egypt today. The account that he gave of the god Set just doesn't match what we know about him as, you know, the storm god, and, you know, was worshipped by Seti's whole family, and you know, a lot of other things that personally I think are just, it's too romanticized to be likely, you know, as a true story. She may have been an ancient Egyptian in a past life, but it's doubtful that many of the details that she related were actually true. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. Some people have put a lot of effort into trying to recall past life details. That's not easy to do. Referring again to Buddhism, it's said that only the Buddha had clear past life recall. That was something that only through great wisdom and enlightenment could you be able to do. And if you concentrate too much on learning what went on in a past life, you're likely to miss things that you need to see and do in this life. And certainly you'll be stuck having to come back until you get it right. So that's my 2 cents on reincarnation. Hopefully this will give you some insight and some useful information for your own Egyptian pagan, Kemetic, or other pagan practice. So for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon wishing you Senepti.